Well, welcome to Personal Finance. So this is the BA 131 course. We're going to go through quite a bit of stuff. We're going to jump into the first lesson tonight. I talked a little bit in the welcome thing about the syllabus, so you kind of got a little bit of idea on that in terms of how the grading is going to be. Again, it's fairly straightforward. Look in there, and it'll tell you what to do in terms of testing procedures and kind of the grade breakdown and the rest of that. Big picture though, in personal finance, well, first about me, I've been up in Alaska since about 2010 or so. I've got a couple daughters. I raise Vizslas, have some horses. I moved, my original part of my career was I did about 23 years in the Air Force. I flew F4s and then F-15Es. So I got in very tail end of F4s. I'm not that old, but anyway, that's the way it was. I've got a Yak 52 now, but it's actually in pieces right now. A couple years ago, I was in the Eagle River, but now I moved out to the valley, and I've got pretty good chunk of land, like 93 acres, and so part of it was this part here that a lot of you may be familiar with. This is Connect River Bridge, Connect River here. And anyway, this was a kind of whatever bunch of stuff, bad stuff going on out at the beach. So turned it into a campground, and it's good for me. So now I've got a place to take my horses and my dogs, and the campground sort of kind of works out. I raise some pigs too on the farm. In fact, they're out there at the beach once in a while. I've got some cattle, Scottish Highlanders, more pigs, had some pheasants, of course, more Vizslas. That's Bo, one of the very good dog. Um, my experience, so in the military, I mean, I do actually have some business experience. And the first part, first half of my career, I spent flying, but the second half was really doing more business oriented stuff. We were doing a bunch of stuff. I was kind of the guy for getting helicopters from Eastern Europe. Uh, well, some were from Slovakia, but a lot of from Lithuania. Anyway, old Soviet satellite nations, and they had some helicopters, needed them in Afghanistan, so we were selling those. It was all legit, but it was good business experience. Through the course of my military stuff, I got an MBA, and then finally got stuck in Afghanistan for a while, and so rather than waste time, I went ahead and got my PhD there. Now I work for Booz Allen Hamilton. Some of you may have heard of them. Fairly big deal in terms of a consulting company. I do strategic communications for NORAD. Um, I still have this company, Alaska Equestrian Supply, but it's kind of been rolled into the larger Connect River Ranch. And real estate, that's kind of a tough gig. I did that for just a little bit on the side, but it was like literally my third job at the same time, and so it's interesting, but it wasn't for me, and I didn't have enough time to dedicate to it. But I do have a little bit of whatever know a little about real estate, and I certainly am involved in real estate deals now and then. So it's in terms of personal finance, in terms of investing, real estate is a pretty good way to go, as some of you may know, or we'll find out. Um, and then Connect River Ranch is the name of the entity for the campground, for actually for the farm and for the rest of that. The farm is not that big a deal, but believe me, if you uh, want to have favorable tax treatment, being a farmer is what you're looking for. So this is what I was talking about in terms of real estate. I mean, this was a super complex deal because it was, I had to split these properties up, and just this um, piece of real estate had been on the market for a while because it was tough to buy with all the different things, the flood zone, trying to get loans, trying to get anybody to loan on it because the it's has a house on it, but it's kind of a beater, and so no bank would loan with a ratio of the house value to the property value, and so all right, so jumping right into the course. There's basically two kinds of people in the world. There's people who earn interest and people who pay interest. And the split is, I don't know, probably 90 some percent of the people pay a whole lot more interest than they earn, which makes things exceedingly nice for the 10% who earn interest. And so the choice is yours. I mean, you need to, do what you can to be one of the people who is able to benefit from your investments rather than be somebody who's, more or less living paycheck to paycheck. So it's not all about greed. I mean, it really has more to do with people who have a sufficient amount of money, don't need to worry about money. Whereas people who are, behind the power curve that are, you know, on living on the margins, they really need to spend a lot more time worrying about their money, and obviously it affects their life and affects the people around them and what they can do. And so it's not that difficult to be smart with your money, but time value of money is really a critical concept. So a lot of people most people I would say end up being pretty smart with their money, but for a lot of them, if they're in their 50s or something, by the time they finally figure it out, it's kind of too late because the money, they don't have time for that money to work for them. And so that's what I'm trying to illustrate with these graphs. Now these graphs will be, attached where you can sit there and pick them apart, and look at them, and with because it's kind of fine print here. But there's nothing magical about these graphs. You could do it yourself if you knew a little about Excel, but the basic numbers are straightforward. Anybody could calculate this. So it looks kind of overwhelming, but I'll show you some details. So first off, there's three different charts. There's what we're talking about here. There's a Roth IRA. We'll talk more about Roth IRAs. Individual retirement account is what an IRA is, and a Roth is a unique kind of IRA. And a Roth IRA, Roth is just the dude's name who passed the bill. But what it means is in a Roth IRA, you use money that you've already paid taxes on, and when you are in retirement status, you're older than age 59 and a half, you can withdraw that money and not pay any taxes on the capital gains. Capital gains are the money that you made off of that. So anyway, we're a lot of information there, but just keep in mind that it's, a retirement account, but that doesn't affect the amount of money you're going to make, but it definitely affects the amount of money that you're going to be able to keep out of the investment. And so we've got three different charts, one at 5, one at 8, and one at 10. I would go straight to the 10 because literally 10% interest is not that unreasonable in terms of an expectation. If you go back to the turn of the century, and I mean 1900, and you put money in the market, the stock market, you could realistically, you would have had an expectation or should have had an expectation that you would have made 10%. And that's with all the ups and downs. I mean, what really makes the headlines is when, the great stock market crash happens in the 30s, but people who didn't sell or didn't have to sell, whatever, yeah, they probably lost money those particular years, but they made huge amounts of money on other years. And anyway, the average rate of return over that whole period would have been in excess of 10%. So that's what this chart is based upon. It's showing if you were to invest some money early in your life, what would occur in terms of that money appreciating over your lifetime. So just some of the specifics here. This guy, gal, whatever, is going to invest 5,500 per year, which equates to about $500 a month, taking 1 month off, say December for Christmas or something. And then at age 50, they're going to push it up a little bit, 6,500 until age 65. There's investment totals that are going to be present at age 65. 5 to 10%, talked about that. ROI, return on investment, cost of delay. What you're going to find, for this chart is kind of set up for folks who might be in the military and, start making an income right at age 18. for a lot of y'all, obviously you're going to college, and if by the time you graduate and get a job, 25, 30, that is going to affect more than you would, logically calculate because it's that time value of money, especially on those early years, has a much greater effect because of the time distance there. What can make this situation much worse is if you have a bunch of student loans and you're having to pay off your student loans before you can start investing for retirement and start buying a house, and now you're into your 40s or something, and it's very tough to get there from there when you start later in life because you haven't allowed that time value of money to work for you. So, so there's not a lot of magic here, but the numbers are fairly astounding. So this case, the guy's putting away 5,500 per year till age 50, and then 6,500. How much money do you think that person's going to have at 10% interest compounded? Yeah, this is the number right here, 5.3 million bucks. So you could live pretty well, or you could leave quite a bit of money to whatever charity or your kids or whatever. I mean, that is a fairly good nest egg. The other thing about this, we're going to talk a lot about retirement savings in this course, but just the fact that you have that money in the account, you can use that during your working life. If you get in a scrape or whatever, there's typically hardship provisions within the IRS code that will allow you to reach in and grab some of that money to cover expenses. Um, Normally, if you touch an individual retirement account before your age 59 and a half, you're paying a 10% penalty. You've got some other things going on, but anyway, it's nice to have that money accruing so that you can work against it, and you can always take a loan against it. But we'll get more into that later. So here's that one part of the chart. Here's the guy age 18. He put in $273,000 altogether. So that's 5,500 per year, and then that's 6,500. So that's how much was put in. Just 273,000. And because of the time value of money, it ended up being 5.3 million, which gives you a return on investment of damn near 2,000%. So that's pretty remarkable. Now this column here shows this cost of delay. Now some of this stuff's inevitable. Obviously, the ship has sailed. If you're 23 right now, you can't, reverse time. But by doing that, your grand total at the end is going to be somewhat less. So that cost of delaying is costing you substantially, and so that number at the end is going to be 3.2 million. Still, comfortable in terms of livable, but you might need to put more of your salary in there or whatever to get up to the amount you want to be. So anyway, um, I realize we're kind of pushing things up here, but I just want to kind of emphasize this time value of money because it kind of builds to it in the book, and I don't think they graphically show you that quite as dramatically until sometime first. So now we're going to get back into the actual chapter part of the book, and we'll look at financial planning, but keep in the back of your mind, in personal finance, just some of the concepts, and one of the main things you need to think about is that time value of money. Another thing to keep in mind is, let's say you let your credit cards kind of roll away from you and you're paying lots of interest on your credit cards. Those same compound interest charts work just fine the other direction. So you can be paying tremendous amounts of interest if you don't keep things under control. So financial planning, personal finance. So process of spending, financing, and investing. The plan and opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is going to come up time and time again. So, for somebody who says, well, there's no way I'm going to come up with 500 bucks. to invest every month or whatever. Sometimes it's better to have a percentage of your salary. Well, you need to, find a way to make that happen, and you need to look at your finances and, um, you know, more or less account for where that money is going, so that you can end up putting a portion of your salary into some sort of savings account. So the way opportunity cost figures into that, a simple example would be, let's say you go to Starbucks every day, and you're spending whatever, $3 to $5 on a cup of coffee every day. Well, if you do the math, obviously that's what, $150. So yeah, it's you know, I'm not saying to give everything up, but for everything that you spend on, there's something that you are not going to have the money for on the other side. So, for example, if you have a brand new car every 3 years, that money that you're pouring away, or whatever, pissing away in my mind, is not um, not good. You're giving up quite a bit there that is going to probably catch up with you. And there's going to come a point in time where you're going to have to forego some investments or some property you might want to have had because of some of the decisions you made earlier in your life. So anyway, opportunity cost is just what you give up. Um, every spending decision has an opportunity cost. Obviously, financial advisors, especially if they're people on commission, they may not have your best interest at heart. Um, fiduciary advice is what you're after. Fiduciary means that somebody who's considering your situation and is not seeking to profit from um, your situation. So um, the only financial advisors I would ever consider are people that are like a fee for service type thing, where it's like a lawyer and you pay them an hourly wage or a fixed wage, but nothing based upon a commission. I don't need to buy things from them through them that may color their advice that they're giving to me. Financial advisor, there are lots of opportunities, because there's just not many out there that give that kind of unbiased advice. And anyway, the wealthier people will generally have somebody to rely upon. Anymore, I mean, I don't have personally a financial advisor, but I do, in terms of like stock market type things. I definitely subscribe to some newsletters and some advice type things that are where there's a subscription paid, and that's the way they work out their income stream. Anyway, components of financial plan. So budgeting, tax planning. Tax planning is huge. As I mentioned before, part of the reason I have a farm is not necessarily for the money the farm makes, but for some of the tax benefits. And so, making money is a great thing, but being able to hold on to it is even better. Budgeting is a necessary, thing. We'll talk about budgeting here. Managing liquidity. You'll see people who have tremendous amounts of money in terms of assets, perhaps, but you'll see it more often in companies that fail, where they have a good product. They're appear to be doing quite well, but they can't manage their cash flow. They don't have available money. It's all tied up in things, and they can't meet payroll. They can't pay their utilities, and things fail. So you need to make sure that you have liquidity, and that's the ability to get to cash as needed. Financing large purchases. Financing lending can be a two-edged thing. You hear a lot of the pundits talk about, they want to be completely debt free, which there are really no absolutes. If you're talking for, say, vehicles, credit cards, yeah, carrying a balance on those and paying those things is that is destructive. But financing property, that's how it's done. and the interest rates are low, and that's how you get ahead is by borrowing money. So um, anyway, it can help you or hurt you. Protecting your assets and income, insurance. We'll discuss that. Investing your money. Um, Again, you have to, there's risk and return are directly related, and inflation is not the rate is not necessarily constant, but the fact that inflation is going to occur is constant. So if you're going to put your money in, say, a regular, savings and loan type thing or a bank and expect to get ahead, that's just not going to happen for you. You need to, um, you know, put it in real estate, put it in the stock market, do something with it. But otherwise, your money is going to get eaten away by inflation. The amount of money will stay the same, but the insidious part is the buying potential. So the buying power of it will be degraded. And planning retirement in your state. So generally, you are planning for your retirement in the state, but as I said, it's sort of a stepping stone. You're planning for your retirement, but you can tap into that money as I've done, and most people will do. So assets and liabilities. Assets are things you own, you know. So a lot of people say, "Oh, I've got my home as my asset." Well, depends. How much of that is you actually have equity? If you've got a $300,000 home on a $300,000 house, you really don't have an asset. You've got a 300,000 liability. I'm not saying to steer clear of buying a house. It's one of the best ways to get ahead. But assets are things that are truly are paid, not things that have loans. Loans would be in the liability sections, and loans are what you owe. And you subtract those two, and hopefully you have a positive number, which would mean you have a positive net worth. Um, Budget affects standings. Yep, 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 yep. So you need to live within your means. You need to have at least some sort of, you know, however it may be, some small chunk of purple. Otherwise, you're borrowing, and you're not living within your means, and that's gonna come to a halt at some point. Now, obviously, there's certain months, certain time periods where you may have an issue, but if you had the savings, then you can dip into that, and over the long term, your um, chart should look something like this. And yeah, big spender, big saver. Anyway, the fact is, whatever pick a number, 10 or 20% of your income should be going into savings for retirement. It depends on a number of factors, whether the company or corporation or entity you're working for has a pension plan. If it doesn't have a pension plan and it's all on you, then yeah, you better be approaching the 20% number if you hope to you know have a decent retirement. Liquidity. So we talked about access to cash and money management, just how you're going to get that done. Take care of your short-term obligations. Credit management. So credit, like I say, is very complex. I mean, credit is not a bad word. High interest credit that's not tax deductible. Yeah, that's a path to ruin. But low interest real estate loans that are tax deductible, um, that is a powerful tool that you have available. It allows you to control quite a bit of a huge asset that, oh, by the way, is appreciating with inflation, and you're controlling it with a small amount of money. That's called leverage, and that's a good thing. Anyway, managing your liquidity, keeping some money available, cover expenses. So, loans needed for large expenditures, so college tuition, just go easy on that. Take only what you need. Cars, houses, managing loans. So again, most people will take a loan for their vehicles, and almost everyone will take a loan for their home. But anyway, not all loans are the same, and obviously you're going to get the best interest rate you can, and that interest rate is often going to be related to the underlying asset. So anyway, the more security the lender has, typically the lower the interest rate. So a house is going to have quite a low interest rate. Cars a lot of times will have low interest rates, but that's because it's kind of baked in terms of a marketing thing. In college tuition, it is what it is. There we are. Insurance planning. So it's a requirement, obviously, legal requirement to have liability to protect other folks, when you're out there driving a vehicle. Homeowners, since you have the loan, most people have a mortgage, obviously the lender is going to want to make sure that their equity is protected. And also, even if you own the home outright, you certainly would want some insurance to make sure you're protecting yourself, but there's not a legal requirement for that. With a homeowner, typically the mortgage provider will require you to have that insurance. Health insurance is a mess right now, but it should get resolved. We'll spend more time on that. Disability, life insurance to protect your income. So disability insurance is there's an elective bit to that. Life insurance is interesting, but keep in mind that your life insurance needs are going to change. They're not going to be constant throughout your life. If you're just a college student, you don't have anybody relying upon you, then you absolutely don't need life insurance. Don't worry about it. Same thing if you're 60 or 70 years old and your kids are already grown and your house is paid off and nobody's really dependent upon you, then you don't need insurance either. And it's going to be super expensive because your propensity to die is quite a bit higher. So anyway, life insurance needs change over the course of your life. Planning for your investing. So the basic thing with investing is the concept is called pay yourself first, right? What you need to do is you need to just look at your monthly bills, and whatever number you decide on, let's say it's 10%, you need to make that 10% a bill. It needs to be paid, on the first day of the month or whenever you get your paycheck, just like another bill. Because if you approach this with the concept, well, I'm going to get the money that's left over at the end of the month, that's not super reliable, and generally that money will be whittled away on other stuff, and you're going to be stressing about it all month. You're just far better off to set up that minimum amount that you're going to invest and pay that as a bill the first of the month, and then if there's extra money at the end of the month, great, maybe invest some more, but at least you've covered your minimum. So anyway, primary objective to earn a high return, which, as I discussed, return and risk are typically related. But when you're young, if the stock market takes a dump tomorrow, you've got time to ride it out. You don't sell, you just ride it out, and the numbers will come back for you. Here they're talking about stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate. We'll cover all of those. Risk, uncertainty, that the potential return on an investment. Anyway, if there's no risk, there's no reward. People are not going to pay you 10% if you're not exposed to a certain amount of risk. What you need to do is make sure that the risk that you're exposed to, that you're compensated for it. Manage investments to keep risk at a tolerable level, which is smart. Planning for real estate or retirement in your estate. So retirement, the estate basically is what comes after. You're gone, and your estate is what's left over for your survivors. Insurance planning, retirement, estate planning. How much of wealth will be distributed upon your death? And it may be, hey, kids are on their own. Let's try and end up at zero. The problem is, though, that people live a bit longer than they anticipate. So it'd be a poor planning to run out of money and you're still alive. Building your financial plan. Yep, builds wealth. everything affects inflows and outflows. Cash you receive, cash you spend, and liquidity deals with just short-term cash issues. Budgeting. So we'll talk more about budgeting, and budgeting almost becomes a intrinsic task. Um, some people find it helpful to set up a budget. I mean, it's a good idea to know what's going on, but for my mind, I find it more useful to look back at where the money was spent over, say, the previous month and kind of analyze where the money went and, modify it the following month. Your job, your income, your cash. So we'll look at that. And when you're doing the big term project, one of the things you'll look at is given your potential career, how much money does a person in that your given choice, how much money do they make? And then you'll use that as a planning figure going through. Sometimes you may figure out that, hey, I want more out of life, or I'm doing something where I'm not going to make a tremendous amount of money, and so I'm definitely going to have to be wiser in terms of investing. I mean, there's books written about wealthy barbers and people who make bus drivers who end up as millionaires because they're very smart with their money. They realize what they're up against. They know that their given career field's not going to generate a tremendous amount of money, so they're going to have to be even smarter with their investments. Some more cash issues, cash deficiencies. Using credit cards is not a bad thing. In fact, I use credit cards almost exclusively rather than cash just because it provides a means of tracking things. And my tax planning at the end of the year is, anyway, it's pretty complicated. But in order to write things off, I need a record of where the money went. And so by using credit cards, it's, the statement will be 20 pages long, but it does provide all of the charges throughout the course of the year. So again, they're just showing another example. Should you lease a car? Short answer is no. But anyway, sometimes if you've got a business situation, there can be a situation where a lease is advantageous, but generally not. Should you borrow money to purchase a car? Depends on the loan, amounts and the rest of it. Should you borrow money to purchase a home? Typically, yes. How much cash? How long a period? Anyway, all these different things. You'll look at your situation, and you'll look at the terms of the loan, and you'll make a decision based upon that. But we'll discuss just about all of these. Protecting your wealth. So there's, some types of insurance are elective, some types of insurance are mandatory. Um, but again, you have quite a bit of latitude on deductibles and things like that. Um, and for the most part, insurance is it's a fairly wide open market. So they're um, sometimes you need to search out the competitive rates, but it's a fairly efficient marketplace. How much cash should be used? What types? We'll discuss that. And how much risk should you tolerate? Some people are super risk averse, and it's unfortunate because it's going to cost them. And they think they're taking the very safe, prudent way, but sometimes it's not safe at all. It's just more insidious, and it can be detrimental to your long-term ability to build wealth. So again, how much should you invest? What type of investment? So again, this is just an overview of things we'll discuss in the course. Yep. Yeah, these are short-term fixes. The big picture is you need to live within your means, trying to withdraw from your savings or, add overtime or take a loan. A lot of those things are just going to exacerbate the situation in the long run. You need to realize where the money's going and not make commitments that are going to be long-term drains on your account. There's also something to be said for having, cash on hand when there is a good deal, when there's a piece of property or something else where you're able to take advantage of it by having the funds available, the credit available to move on it. Yep. And all this stuff is interrelated. Liquidity, insurance. But again, when we're putting money away from retirement, there's many programs where, for a first-time home buyer, you can tap into that. I take business loans against my retirement accounts. I've bought property and characterized them as an individual retirement account. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do in your working years that can draw upon that, the assets you have in your retirement. Psychology. This really has a lot to do with, whether it's your spouse, your partner, whatever, that if you have different outlooks, one's a spender, one's a saver, a lot of times those frustrations um, and those differences become more apparent. And especially if you're under financial stress, if are behind the power curve in terms of saving money, in terms of, living paycheck to paycheck, then that can be the ruin. Um, kind of personal questions. Yep. So what we're going to do is these are the homework problems. They're going to come out of the book. Um, the way this works is that the homework, you're not going to see a place to turn it in each week. It'll be turned in as a block assignment prior to the exam. So you've got, many weeks. You can look on the syllabus when the um, midterm is, and the homework just needs to be turned in prior to that midterm, and it's turned in via Blackboard. Now, whatever format you want to use, Excel, Word, um, if you want to do it out on paper and just take a photo of it and send it as JPEG, whatever works for you, whatever's easiest. That's how that's done. All right. So welcome to the class. We'll get more in depth. This was just kind of an overview, but look forward to the rest of the term.